My son looked at me with a grin. Back turned. Bowl in hand. Completely casual. "Hey Dad, why did you need me to let you in last night?" I hadn't left the house. My wife and 2 boys were in Phoenix for the week. I stayed behind. Boss politics. Downsizing. The kind of quiet desperation you don't talk about at dinner. 5 o'clock hit on Monday and I was out the door. Stopped for Chinese takeout. Changed into sweatpants. Dropped into my lazy boy. General Tso and bad TV. Not glamorous, but mine. 15 minutes of peace. That's all I got. The doorbell hit like a slap. I opened the door expecting a neighbor. Maybe a package. What I got instead was wrong. Not dangerous wrong at first. Just deeply, inexplicably wrong. The man on my porch looked like he'd stepped out of a 1962 Sears catalog. 3-piece tweed suit. Gray fedora. Brown leather briefcase. A vintage Hoover vacuum at his side, the cord coiled neat as a noose. His teeth were the kind of white that doesn't occur in nature, and when he smiled immediately, fully, like the expression had been loaded and waiting. He wanted to come inside. Demonstrate the vacuum. Just a moment of my time. I said no. The smile dropped. Not slowly. Instantly. Like a power cut. "You won't let me in?" Something in his voice shifted when I said no a second time. The salesman routine fell away and underneath it was something thinner. Something that didn't understand the word. "Please?" I slammed the door. Through the frosted glass I watched his silhouette. Still. Perfectly still. 3 minutes without moving. I swung the door open and threatened to call the police, and he smiled wider, walked backwards off the porch without turning around. Eyes locked on mine the entire way to the sidewalk. I locked the door. Finished my food. Told myself it was nothing. At 1 a.m. the doorbell woke me. A figure on the porch. Backlit. Blinding. Police uniform, but old. 80s vintage. Aviator shades at 1 in the morning. Handlebar mustache thick as a paintbrush. He said he'd received a complaint from this address. I knew I hadn't called. I knew no one had. I asked for his badge number. Silence. I asked for a warrant. No. If I had one, would you let me in? I slammed the door. He banged his fist against it for 15 minutes before the night went quiet again. The next evening I came home to find a man in a gray jumpsuit standing on my porch, knocking slowly, limply, like a metronome. His head turned and tracked me as I pulled into the driveway. He was waiting at the garage before I got out of the car, stopped right at the threshold like an invisible line had been drawn. Never blinked once. He smiled and told me there'd been a call about a burst pipe. "So you're here alone?" he said, when I told him no one had called. The way he said it wasn't concern. It was inventory. I told him to leave. He backed down the driveway and said, quietly, almost to himself, "See you later." That night I tried to grill. Rain came in hard, so I stayed inside the garage, leaving the door wide open for ventilation. The smell of the cooking meat mixed with the cool earthy smell of the rain calmed my nerves, and momentarily made me forget about both work and the strange visitors. Then something moved in the rain. Just a shape at first, dark and fast, running straight at me, and then she hit the light. A girl, maybe 12, stopped dead at the threshold like she'd hit glass. She was crying, soaked. She said someone was chasing her, and I almost let her in. I took 2 steps toward her before something made me stop. Look closer. Her eyes were open, wide, fixed, not blinking, not once, not in all that rain. And then I recognized her face. The Johnson girl. She'd been missing since last summer. The whole neighborhood had searched. Her parents on the news every week, begging. In September they found her body face down in the reservoir. She was wearing the same clothes she died in. Her fingers twitched at her side like a bad signal. And when I didn't move, she smiled, slow and wide, and asked again if she could come inside. I said no. The crying face dropped. What replaced it had nothing human left in it. She lunged and hit the invisible threshold like a wall, screaming, both fists hammering against nothing. "Let me in. Let me in. Let me in." I hit the garage button and ran. That night the house shook. Every window. Every door. The screaming was layered. Girl, then salesman, then cop, then something that didn't bother with a voice at all. Just impact. Over and over until the frames creaked and the walls breathed. I sat on the bathroom floor upstairs, back against the tub, watching the shadow of something that couldn't decide what shape to be passing under the door crack every time a car went by outside. It stopped exactly 30 minutes after sunrise. No marks. No scratches. Not a broken branch in the yard. Like it had never happened. This went on for days. Every evening at 7, knocking. Voices cycling through personas. An old woman. A teenage boy. Accents that started Russian and ended somewhere in Mississippi. Getting angrier each night as I didn't answer. The knocking becoming fists. The fists becoming something that shook the foundation. I didn't sleep. Barely ate. But my family was flying home, and I had to pick them up myself. I had to see them walk off the plane with my own eyes before I'd believe they were real. Seeing them in the arrivals hall felt like breaking the surface of water. My wife looked at my face and said I looked terrible. I told her I'd explain in the car. She thought I was losing it. My youngest asked if I'd been smoking weed. She promised to rub my shoulders. I nodded and watched the clock, because at 7 p.m. they'd see for themselves. 7 came. Nothing. 8:30. Still nothing. By 10 I was almost convinced I'd imagined the whole week. Stress and insomnia and too much time alone in a quiet house. My wife rubbed my shoulders and I was asleep before I could finish the thought. I slept through the entire night. First time in a week. Morning. Coffee. Toast. Facebook. Normal. My oldest came downstairs, went to the cabinet for a cereal bowl, back to me, easy grin on his face. "Hey Dad, why did you need me to let you in last night?" The mug was warm in my hands. I set it down very carefully. "What?" He turned, still smiling. "Last night, you knocked on my window. Said you were locked out. I came down and let you in through the back. I hadn't left the bedroom. I hadn't knocked on anything." I looked at my son's face. His eyes were bright. Open. Perfectly normal. I searched them for something wrong, for that flat, unblinking stillness I'd learned to recognize over the past week. I didn't see it. But I'd also spent a week watching things that looked exactly like people. We haven't opened the front door since. I'm not saying my son isn't my son. I believe he is. I have to believe that. But something got in that night. Something that had been cycling through voices and faces all week finally found the right one. Or maybe my boy just let his exhausted, sleep-deprived father in through the back door, and I'm unraveling. I don't know which version is worse. What I know is this: whatever's been trying to get in, it needed permission. It tried a salesman, a cop, a plumber, a dead girl. It kept trying new voices, new faces, new angles. It got angrier every night it failed. And then my family came home. And that night, for the first time all week, it didn't knock on the front door. The cord was just hanging there, dangling loose against the dresser, coiled on the floor like something dead. No outlet, no plug, nothing. And the radio was still playing. I've slept next to the same radio my entire life. AM/FM, digital clock, a CD player that stopped working when I was 5. My brother knocked it off the dresser. He said it was an accident. It wasn't. The radio became everything after that. Not just background noise, something closer to a bodyguard. A presence. When the static would catch a signal late at night, there'd be a voice, and the voice meant I wasn't alone, and not being alone meant I could breathe. Because the nights in that house, they weren't quiet. The fighting would start in the afternoon, my brother rolling and stinking of cigarettes and something worse, and it would build. Slow at first, then louder. Voices to shouting, shouting to sobs, sobs to fists against drywall. By midnight it was supposed to trail off. Most nights it did. Most nights. The radio sat there through all of it. Unmoved for 15 years. Never unplugged. Always on. I was thinking about that today, standing in my half-empty bedroom, Last boxes stacked by the door, leaving for college tonight, when I looked over at it one final time. There was one night I've never really talked about. I was a kid, young enough that I still counted safety by how thick the blankets were over my head. That night was different. Worse. The sounds coming through the floor weren't the usual rhythm of it. This had escalated past shouting into something heavier, something that landed differently. I could feel it in my sternum. Even past midnight it kept going. Round after round. I turned up the static. Somewhere in the white noise I must have nudged the dial, because suddenly there was a voice. Clear. Calm. A PSA. The kind that used to play between TV reruns. No specific scenarios. Just a quiet insistence that help was one phone call away. That you shouldn't hesitate. That it wasn't too late. Then a number, read aloud slowly, twice. It faded out. A song started. Rabid Child by They Might Be Giants, short, strange, not what you'd expect at midnight on a Tuesday. And then, the PSA again. Same message. Except this time, the number came first. I took it as a sign. I crept down the hall, careful, slow, weight on the balls of my feet, into my parents' room, found my mom's phone, and dialed. I don't quite recall what I said to the operator, but I remember my hands were shaking. I remember they told me help was coming fast. I put the phone back exactly where it was, crept back to my room, pulled the blankets over my head. The PSA played one more time as I lay there. Then it gave way to something slower, organ hum, soft bells, the kind of music that belongs at the edge of sleep. I was still awake when the sirens came. But somehow, I think it was that song, still droning next to me in the dark. I fell asleep to the sound of my brother being taken out of the house downstairs. He was gone by morning. He was gone for months. When he came back once to collect his things, I didn't speak to him. He left. That was the last time. I still sleep with the radio on. So today I looked at it, really looked at it, and felt something I couldn't quite name. Gratitude, maybe. Or something older than that. I figured it should be the last thing I packed and the first thing I unplugged. A small ritual for 15 years of quiet company. Friday, May 31st. They'll be headlining at the Cosmic Dance Floor in Springfield before heading up north on Saturday. I switched it off. Reached behind the dresser. Grabbed the cord. It offered no resistance. Because it wasn't plugged into anything. The cord just hung there. Limp. Swaying slightly. No outlet. Nothing behind the dresser but dust and old paint. I turned it over. Checked the battery compartment. Empty. I stood there for a long moment. Heart doing something strange and slow in my chest. Then I put it back on the dresser. And switched it on. Day where they'll be opening for Parsonsfield at the Dial-Up Lounge in Portland. Get your tickets now because they're selling fast. Don't hesitate before it's too late. I don't have an explanation for any of it. I've thought about it for years. The timing. The PSA. The way it played 3 times, like it was waiting for me to do something. Like it needed me to hear it enough times to actually move. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe a kid in a bad situation heard what he needed to hear, and his brain filled in the rest. But that cord was in my hand, and there was nothing on the other end of it. Whatever it was looking out for me. I packed it last. And yeah, it'll be the first thing I unplug in the new place.